problem down the road. Because schools that don't get accredited aren't going to shut down programs.
They'll call it something else.
Yeah. Well, they'll call it public history. I mean, you can't stop them from calling it public history and keep training students.
And I agree. I don't think the credentialing or accrediting programs or certificates is going to go anywhere. Something that NCPH is trying to do is just cast more light, make the whole system more transparent to students, so they can discern some of those differences from afar before they get into a phone conversation with Craig, and so they know what questions to ask, and that's something so we have this online guide to programs, which it's very hard to get programs to. I have board members, maybe not right now, but I've had board members who run certain programs who've never done an entry for their university, and they have a public history program, so it's hard to get people to do that, but the intention behind it, when I created it about 5 years ago, was to allow programs to see what each other is doing, so peer-to-peer kind of pressure, like, oh wow, they offer that much assistantship, well, is there any way we can offer more? And so that potential students and current students would know the lay of the land and not just, even though recognizing that many students are sort of trapped by their geography, they're not going to move across the country for a program, so they're in this region. So that's something we're trying to do.
I'm Claude Stevens from Burnham Forest. I've heard some talk about preparing students for a tight market. I've heard talk about preparing students to move laterally out of the market because they're just trained as good thinkers. But I'd like for you to talk about how you would expand your market. There's lots of heritage makers out there that don't see their organization as having a role in public history, and yet they have probably a vital role in that. How do you, as an organization, and how do you train your teachers to go knock those organizations into the market so that your market is now bigger?
If the question is to me, I don't do that. I have plenty to do, and I don't have the skills to do that. I would have no idea. I'm just an honest person. I would have no idea except go have a conversation with specific institutions, but yeah, it's an excellent question. It's something I've never given any thought to.
I have, but I don't know the answer, or the one right answer. I think there are lots of things that can be done. One is just increasing people's understanding and the value they ascribe to history and what historians do. There's an effort that's taking form right now with some people in this room and some people not in the room about creating a national branding strategy for history. We know Americans love history. We see it everywhere, from the History Channel to movies, and every 5 years I read yet another article where the historian writing it starts off trying to show how much Americans love history, and I guess I'm kind of doing that right now, but you all know Americans love history, whether they call it heritage or history. And the trick is going to be to get people to value history enough to pay for it, to value history enough to raise taxes for it, to fund certain institutions, to not cut them from state, city, or national budgets, and to hire historians, people with BAs, MAs, and PhDs in history in leadership positions, instead of hiring someone with just an MBA or a JD or some other, or coming from the business community. Those are all great degrees and great professions, but if it's a cultural agency, a historical institution, should be a historian, someone with, who gets hired over another profession or discipline. And that's something that my association, the AHA, the OEH to a certain extent, are starting to talk about more and more. The AHA has been talking about that for decades, but I see, because of the Great Recession and the saturation of the market, these people are talking a lot more about it, and I think doing some things that will make a difference.
I think one way, we've tried to do that here to some extent is by having conversations that put people themselves as historical. You know, I'm speaking to somebody that works at one, but, you know, show them what a well-trained historian can do and sort of, you know, be evangelists for what the skill sets a historian brings to a particular project and, you know, hopefully other things while they're there. You know, and there are quite a few of those instances where we've done that already in the short time that I've been here. I think, you know, we're starting with a market where there hasn't been professional training, and so we're probably at a steep curve relative to what's going to be normative. But I think that well-trained people can find opportunities and help institutions grow in ways that they may not be aware of themselves. And so that's part of the equation. I think, you know, wherever you are, there are lots of opportunities to build connections. And, you know, I have a running list of institutions and municipal offices that I really need to call and make contact with. But, you know, there's a limit to what one gets done in every day. But it's an excellent question, and it's a great point that speaks to the relevance of public history, but also how we as a discipline and a profession need to reach out more.
Hello, my name is Whitney Todd. I am a graduate student currently, and I also am in the education department at the Kentucky Historical Society. And my question, you kind of said, you know, Americans love history. Well, you guys really haven't talked about audience. How are these programs and how is the academic world and the public history world merging together? How is that improving audiences, or what is coming out of public history? You know, can you talk a little bit about how audiences are benefiting from this, you know, new changes in public history? So.
Well, I would, first of all, I would, when thinking about audience and shared authority, people, let's not call them the public, because that's off-putting, it's us, people we know, our neighbors, our family members, businesses down the street. People love history, and people are doing history, and people have always done history. People are doing genealogy, and the tools for doing that, for doing history are becoming more accessible, as I was saying earlier, and you all know, with things being digitized, Ancestry.com. You know, people were doing genealogy long before Ancestry.com came along, but it is taking off. It's a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar thing out there, and you know, at the same time, experts, professionals, scientists, historians, other scholars are crowdsourcing more and more projects, and we hear about this all the time. The National Archives crowdsource, you know, gets people to tag things, it gets people to transcribe things, and so, you know, we're sharing authority. We don't really have a choice about it anymore. It's starting to take off around us, and if we don't jump on the train, it's leaving the station without us. And so it's more important than ever for public historians, whatever we want to call ourselves, to be out there in a forward-thinking kind of way, working with audience, because there are private companies doing it, and people are doing it on their home computer, digging deep into the archives from the comfort of their sofa. And they're doing history, and I mean, that's one of the great things about history, right, is that everyone can be a historian, and that's one of the problems. That's why someone can start a heritage association or society or group, and they're doing history, and they don't need any of those. We don't need any stinking PhDs or MAs or BAs, because you know, we're doing my story is not your story. You know, that's one of the problems of history, is that we've opened it up so much. We're telling. It's not a problem, it's a great thing, but it turns into a challenge when you have so many voices in history. I mean, think of textbooks now are just so thick because it's everyone's history. And that allows people to hive off and create their own little silos. That's the problem of the internet. You know, Google allows us to only see what we're interested in. I don't see what you see when you search the term public history. You see things I don't see. And we have to recognize that and act fast. I don't know what to do, but.
So how does then the academic institutions tap into that? I don't know. I just feel like there's a disconnect between everyone doing this at home with all this digital stuff and what you're doing in the academic world and the interpretations that are coming out of that with public history and everything. I feel like there's still a disconnect between, I don't know, just, maybe I'm not making this clear, but that, I I know, still, what are, the audiences are benefiting from the digital stuff, but what else then is public history, you know, with this academic spin doing?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure our students go out with an academic spin on them. I mean, we train them to think like an academic historian, but in class after class, we discuss, and there's only so much we can do in a graduate program, a professionalization program. But we discuss the issue of then relating those types of ideas to an audience that in many cases wouldn't really embrace those ideas. And what's too far? I mean, I'm from North Carolina. Similar problems here. What's too far in the discussion of slavery at a historic site? How much will an audience accept before they start turning away from the docent and stop listening? And those are issues of audience that we deal with. You know, there's only, I appreciate John's comment. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face as public history teachers, is finding ways to now tap into the rage for personal history that's going on in our nation, and I'm one of them. I mean, I record every Who Do You Think You Are, BBC and US, and I watch them thoroughly. 'Cause, look, I mean, there's no better advertisement out there for the role of historians in our society than those programs. And so, you know, but there's only so much we can do as public history teachers to get students, because let's face it, and you know this is true, we can tell you everything about an audience and you won't know it until you're finally in front of an audience. And you have children who are inattentive and people who look at you like, you know, what in the world are you talking about, and why would you think I care about this, right? And so, you know, that's one of those on-the-job things that each of us, I mean, it's not easy for me to sit up here and talk to all of you. You know, and I have to make those adjustments too. It's not something I do on a regular basis. So.
I think the best public historians that I know are facilitators, right? And it's the idea, it's the same sort of principles of what makes a good educator. It's finding the person where they're at, but drawing them out of their individual silos, right? And making larger connections. That's on the theoretical level. How that happens practically, programmatically, maybe your generation of public historians can solve.
I saw a bunch of hands go up. This gentleman had a question.
Sure, I'm fairly new to history and digital history in particular, and I'm a bit skeptical about the accuracy of what goes on the internet and such.
A bit?
So convince me, and I think my generation and older may be even more skeptical, so convince me here, please. Why, you know, make me feel
about what?
good about what's out there.
Convince you
That
that you
it's
should
accurate.
trust the internet? Actually, I would spend most of my time convincing you that you shouldn't trust anything you read on the internet, and you should always go look for evidence that's going to substantiate whatever you're interested in. That's not on the internet. And I teach beyond public history, and I tell students when they begin to write a research topic, go to the internet, look around, see what's out there, find out what's interesting, and then write down your ideas and never look at the internet again, right? And do the rest of your research outside of that computer. So, no, I'm not going to.
I didn't think you would.
I mean, you know, it depends on the institution. I would trust anything on the Library of Congress website. Because that's the federal government, and they would never lie. Right? But I mean, that's far more reliable than, you know,